What's going on, everybody? Welcome into episode 148 of the MudWatch Sports Podcast on this Tuesday, March 17, 2026. I'm your host, Zach Malum. But before we get started, please subscribe below. Follow all of my social accounts. Let's start things off in the world of basketball as the New York Knicks were in action this weekend. Starting on Friday evening, the Knicks were out in Indianapolis to take on the struggling Indiana Pacers. The Knicks won this game 101-92, the final, behind 29 points from their star guy in Jalen Brunson. They also got a monster contribution from the big man. Karl Anthony Towns not playing in this game, so Mitchell Robinson steps into the starting lineup. 31 minutes, he had 12 points along with 22 rebounds in the game, and the Knicks out-rebounded the Indiana Pacers 53-46 in this one. Probably not as big a margin as you expected, but 53 rebounds, I mean, that's a huge help to this Knicks win, and they end up getting the contributions as well from OG Anunoby, who had 25 points in this one, 8 of 16 from the field, 2 of 4 from beyond the arc. He also had 8 rebounds and 5 assists. Still not really getting the full Mikal Bridges experience here just yet. He did have 11 points in the game, but just on 4 of 9 shooting, 1 of 4 from deep. And really the Knicks handled things from here. They end up getting a comfortable win in the end by 9 points, but of course, Karl Anthony Towns missing this game. They needed the big man and Mitchell Robinson to step up, and he definitely did so with those 22 rebounds on the day. Jalen Brunson, of course, doing his thing. 29 points with 9 assists on the day as well. And then when you look at the next game for the Knicks, they would head back home for a tough matchup on their home floor. And it wasn't tough from the standpoint of who was playing for the Warriors. It was the standpoint that the Knicks were down 21 points in the middle of this game, a completely unexpected outing for the Knicks as they went into this game as 15.5-point favorites. And really, it was just all Warriors for the first couple of quarters, and the Knicks had to mount a comeback. Give credit to this Warriors team. Not many guys played in this one. Kristaps Porzingis was out. DeAnthony Melton was out. Of course, Steph Curry still dealing with that injury. They were also without Draymond Green with a back problem. Also, Al Horford missed this game. So everybody was out for the Warriors, minus Brandon Podziemski and a couple of the guys coming off of the bench. Podziemski was phenomenal in this game, and he really led the charge for the Warriors, and that's why they were up for a large portion of this game. 37 minutes, he had 25 points in the game on 8 of 15 shooting, got himself to the free throw line, hit a couple of threes, 5 rebounds, 6 assists as well. So really give credit to Podziemski, but you got to give credit to the Knicks in the end who mounted a comeback. And of course, Jalen Brunson was the lead guy in this game for the Knicks. 30 points on the evening and 9 of 20 shooting. He went 10 of 10 from the free throw line, but he really did a great job distributing the ball. 9 assists in the game, and he really stepped up for this Knicks team. They also got some good stuff off the bench from Jordan Clarkson, 14 points, 6 of 11 shooting from the field. He did hit a three-pointer, and Landry Shamet as well, 10 points, 3 of 10 shooting with just 2 of 8 from beyond the arc. He ends up getting 10 points in the end, not his greatest shooting performance, but behind Brunson, they needed some of their other guys to step up. Karl Anthony Towns did so. 31 minutes in the game after that game against Indiana where he did not play. 7 of 12 shooting, 12 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal, and a block in this one. So the Knicks end up getting the victory. It does not give you a lot of confidence, especially against a Warriors team that had absolutely nobody playing, and they still managed to force the Knicks to only win by 3 in this one, 110-107, But give credit to the Knicks, who also shot the ball very well from the free throw line when they got there, 22 of 23, and that really ends up winning the game as the Warriors only shot 15 free throws on the day to the Knicks 23 on the evening. So a great job by the Knicks to end up getting the win. Again, does not give you confidence heading into the next couple of games, but the Knicks end up having to come back home for another game. They stay home for another matchup, this time against the Indiana Pacers, who they played just a couple of days ago. but they welcome them to Madison Square Garden tonight, a 7:30 start at MSG, and the Knicks come into this game as 15.5-point favorites, total sitting at 223.5. The Knicks should breeze through this game. However, it's going to be somewhat close. Of course, with the Pacers, they end up only losing by 9 the other day. However, they're dealing with injuries right now. Jalen Brunson, also a game-time decision right now for the Knicks, dealing with an ankle issue. Really a question if he'll play or not. Of course, the Pacers on the other side have plenty of injuries to go around. The Knicks 16-point favorites in the end. Of course, they should handle business and try and get their 4th straight win. It's going to be a tough game at the Garden, but the Knicks should handle things if they really have their game on this Tuesday evening. So we'll see what happens, but make sure you tune in later. 7:30 start at the Garden as the Knicks host the Pacers in New York City. Shifting things to hockey, as the New York Islanders are in action tonight. They are up in Toronto to take on the struggling Toronto Maple Leafs. It's a 7 o'clock start, and the Islanders favored coming into this game. They're coming off of that massive win on their home ice on Saturday evening, where it really got a little antsy at the end. The Islanders hold on. They had a phenomenal first period with 3 goals in 9 minutes, and 2 of them came from Simon Holmstrom. They end up taking a 3-0 lead into the first period intermission. They would have to wait till the third period for the Calgary Flames to start coming back in the game. Backlund and then Coleman really give the Islanders a little bit of jitters there at the end, but they hold on for the 3-2 victory, and Simon Holmstrom gets the first star with 2 goals in this one. So the Islanders hold on. A game that they probably should have won comfortably, but you know how it goes with this Islanders team. They play against some tough teams, and they end up winning. Of course, it gets a little antsy when they play against not so tough teams. So far this year, they've played some bad teams and had some bad games against them. So just typical Islanders this season, but they end up holding on for the victory, and that's all that matters. Islanders have won 3 of their last 4. The one blip on Friday when they hosted the Los Angeles Kings at UBS Arena. But now the Islanders go back on another little road trip. This one is up to Canada, and it starts tonight, like I mentioned, 7 o'clock, taking on the struggling Maple Leafs, and then a couple of games after that with Ottawa on Thursday, and then the Montreal Canadiens in what should be a very tough game for the Islanders, as 2 teams really fighting in that playoff picture. Of course, the Islanders are sitting nice and a little bit comfortable in the Metropolitan Division in those top 3 seeds in their spot. But if it gets to the wild card, they're, of course, needing some of those other teams in the Atlantic Division to start losing. And one of those teams is definitely the Montreal Canadiens. So we'll see what happens tonight. It should be a good one. Of course, the Islanders always have some good battles when they face off against the Maple Leafs and John Tavares as well. So that we'll see what happens with that game. Of course, Austin Matthews is out for the season. So Toronto not in a great spot right now. However, of course, anything can happen on any night in the National Hockey League. So make sure you tune in later, 7 o'clock start, as the Islanders take on the Maple Leafs up in Toronto. Let's finish things off today back in the world of basketball, but in the college game. And before we get to a full March Madness preview, we have to talk about New York's team in the St. John's Red Storm, who were crowned back-to-back Big East tournament champs for the first time in program history. They were also crowned back-to-back regular season champs. They are just the second team in Big East history in back-to-back years to be both regular season champs and tournament champs. Complete domination in this one on Saturday evening, where the Red Storm wins 72-52 over UConn in an absolute rout on the day, and a lot of it had to do with the big man, Zuby Ejiofor, who was named Most Outstanding Player of the Big East Tournament. Of course, the Big East Player of the Year as well this season. And the big man had 18 points, 9 rebounds, 7 blocks on the day. He had a couple of assists as well as 3 steals in the game. Just did everything on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. A couple 3-pointers, shot 7 of 11 from the field. Just a dominant game by Zuby Ejiofor, and really proving that he's one of the best players in the country. He did have a great supporting cast in this game as well, and the big one was Bryce Hopkins, who played 38 minutes on the day, 18 points, 7 of 9 shooting, was 2 of 2 from beyond the arc, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal. And a season where Bryce Hopkins had his up and downs, and he hasn't had that true statement type of game where he really stepped up and helped lead St. John's to a victory. I think this one was probably Bryce Hopkins' best game of the year. 38 minutes he played. He only sat out for 2 minutes of the game, and the guy had 18 points on 7 of 9 shooting. Just exactly what you needed behind Zuby Ejiofor, who, of course, was so dominant once again. They did a great job, St. John's did, of turning over UCONN, where UConn continues to play against St. John's, and I remember all the way back to the first time that these two teams played. It was at Madison Square Garden, and 15 UConn turnovers, 9 of them from Silas Demery Jr., was absolutely the difference in the game. Demery Jr. was not the story of this one in terms of the turnovers, although he did have 3 in the game, but it was all throughout. I mean, this completely... St. John's completely dominated UConn on the defensive side of the ball, holding UConn to just 52 points on the day, 34% shooting from the field, and 16% from beyond the arc. Just 3 3-pointers for the Huskies on the day. And that's not going to win you any game. And they completely laid an egg, as Dan Hurley said after the game. They laid an egg on the biggest stage right now in the Big East tournament. And of course, St. John's has proven over the years that they have really taken over the Big East, and they definitely deserve to be Big East champions, both in the regular season and in the tournament. So they end up winning this one by 20, and St. John's ends up looking forward to their first round matchup now against Northern Iowa. And St. John's, of course, when you look at their seeding, 5 seed in the East region, and not many fans are happy about that. They will have to face the Duke Blue Devils most likely if they end up making it to the Sweet 16, which is never an easy matchup. Of course, Duke has their injuries, but in most people's mind, they are the number 1 team in the country for a reason. They've been so dominant. They win the ACC as well against Virginia, and then they have to take on St. John's maybe in the Sweet 16. Of course, the Red Storm, who dominated UConn, and they have only 6 losses on the year. A lot of people should be angry about the path that St. John's was given in this NCAA tournament, but they look forward to this matchup on Friday, where they have to go all the way out to San Diego. I think that's another reason why people are not happy, especially the St. John's fans, who probably aren't going to be able to travel for this game out in San Diego. But the Johnnies come into this game as 10.5-point favorites, total sitting at 131.5. The problem for St. John's in this game will be 3-point shooting, because that's something that Northern Iowa does very well. They can score the ball very well. St. John's a team that can rely on the 3-point ball, but not consistently. They're not consistently a great 3-point shooting team. Northern Iowa is, and St. John's has to do the busy work on the defensive side of the ball if they want any chance of beating the Panthers in this game. It really comes down to defense. I think St. John's will pass this test and they move on to the next round. It won't be an easy matchup if they end up facing off against Kansas. It's just not an easy route for the Johnnies this weekend. We'll end up previewing this game as well on Friday's episode, as St. John's will take on Northern Iowa out in San Diego. Time now for March Madness Superlatives, as we're going to take a deep dive into each region for the upcoming men's tournament. We start things in the East region, of course, led by the number 1 seeded Duke Blue Devils. The team that should be annoyed, in my opinion, is St. John's, who was given a 5 seed in the East, as well as given the matchup against the 12-seeded Northern Iowa Panthers. Northern Iowa, a phenomenal shooting team, especially from beyond the arc. And St. John's, a team that won the Big East regular season title, the Big East tournament. They end up only getting a 5 seed after they completely trucked through UConn in the championship game. The fact that they also have to travel out across the country to San Diego to play against Northern Iowa, giving them no home court advantage at all, with no fans probably traveling out to San Diego, definitely hurts the Johnnies' chances just a little bit, and they end up having to face Kansas most likely in the second round. The hardest path in the East region definitely goes to number 2 UConn, in my opinion, as they take on Furman in the first round, and that's going to be an easy game. The 15-seeded Furman, of course, UConn should handle business out in Philadelphia. However, the second round does not get easy as they take on a very tough UCLA Bruins team who has won 6 of their last 8 games. They have wins versus Illinois, Nebraska, Michigan State, and Purdue. All of those teams are top 4 seeds in their respective regions in this year's NCAA tournament. So UConn is going to have a very tough test. Even if they get past UCLA as well, then they have to take on Michigan State. And it's not going to be easy to get past the Spartans, especially with the experience that Tom Izzo has. The easiest path goes to the 3-seeded Michigan State Spartans, who take on the North Dakota State Bison in the first round on Thursday. They end up having a matchup in the next round against a not 100% Louisville team. If they even get past South Florida, of course, they have Michael Brown Jr., still not 100%, most likely going to play, but even then, there's no word just yet on Brown's status for the NCAA tournament. And then when you look at once Michigan State gets past Louisville and maybe even into the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8, they may not have to face off against UConn or Duke, who have very tough matchups in the second and third round of this year's NCAA tournament. So Michigan State could breeze through and maybe even make it all the way out of the East region and into the Final Four. I really like Michigan State's path this year in the NCAA tournament. The best bet in the East region for me is Ohio State -2.5. They are the number 8 seed taking on the 9 seed TCU Horned Frogs. That one will be the first game of the day on Thursday, a 12:15 start on CBS, and Ohio State should come out strong in that one. TCU may have the size down low, but give me the guards. John Mobley Jr., Bruce Thornton can really both score the ball, and Ohio State being only 2.5-point favorites, I think Ohio State and the Buckeyes handle business against TCU in this one. And finally, for the best underdog, I don't expect them to win this game, but boy, that is a lot of points for California Baptist taking on Kansas, 9:45 on Friday evening. I just think the Lancers, who have won 15 of 17, they have Dominique Daniels, who's averaging 23.2 points per game. And really, when you look at Kansas, how do you trust them outside of Allen Fieldhouse? They have not been great away from home this year. And give me the Lancers to not win. Maybe they win, but at least cover the spread at 14.5. We head to the South region, of course, which is led by the number 1 seeded Florida Gators. The team that should be annoyed in the South has to be Vanderbilt, in my opinion. 26-8, including one of the best wins of the season this past week against the Florida Gators. They completely dominated them in the SEC tournament semifinal, won by 17 points, and they were given a 5 seed and a real annoying path as they take on McNeese in the first round. And of course, Vandy should probably handle business against McNeese in this game, but McNeese, yes, not the same team that they had last year with Will Wade as the coach as he went to NC State, but McNeese is a real tough out, especially in the NCAA tournament, and you have some guys that are definitely experienced on this McNeese team, and they have to handle business, Vanderbilt, in tough fashion against this McNeese team on Thursday afternoon. The hardest path in the South definitely goes to Nebraska for me. They have to face off against a very defensive-focused Troy team in the first round. If they get through that, they probably end up getting Vanderbilt in the second round and then follow that up with a matchup most likely against Florida. It's not going to be easy for Nebraska, who had a really solid season but has really been put into a tough spot here. They are 13.5-point favorites in that first round matchup against Troy. But if Troy gets going on the defensive side of the ball and starts getting stops, it could be very worrying signs for the Cornhuskers as they take on Troy on Thursday at 12:40 p.m. The easiest path in this region has to go to the 1 seed for me, Florida, who ends up, if they win their first round matchup, they probably will with ease, still not 100% who's going to play them. Of course, with the first 4 games taking place Tuesday and Wednesday. If they get through that matchup, then they don't have that tough of a matchup in the second round, whether it is Clemson or Iowa. I think they are miles better than both of those teams. They should end up walking to the Elite Eight in the end, as they would take on most likely Vanderbilt or Nebraska in the round after that in the Sweet 16. They should walk to the Elite Eight. I think Florida will be perfectly fine and definitely got the best draw in that South region. The best bet in the South region has to go to the UNC Tar Heels, -2.5 against VCU on Thursday at 6:50. Give me the Tar Heels, and I understand they do not have Caleb Wilson. Their best player will not be on the floor. But VCU and the love that they're getting, their best wins this year are Virginia Tech and a couple of close wins against Dayton. That's it for the Rams. Give me North Carolina to handle business. They still have Henry Vasar. They still have Derek Dixon. They got some other guys who can step up in the place of Caleb Wilson down low. And of course, not the impact that Wilson would have on the game. But VCU is just not that good enough of a team to take down North Carolina and the experience that they have in the NCAA tournament. Finally, the best underdog in the South region for me is the Texas A&M Aggies at +3.5. Give me the Aggies up against St. Mary's, who, of course, every year is always focused on defense. All Texas A&M has to do in this game is score the ball. And they do that better than most teams in the nation, averaging 87.7 points per game this year. Give me Texas A&M to move past St. Mary's, and they are definitely the best underdog for me in the South region. We move to the West region, where, of course, it is led by the one-seeded Arizona Wildcats. The team that should be annoyed in the West is clearly the Arkansas Razorbacks. Correct me if I'm wrong. They won the SEC championship a couple of days ago. They're a 4 seed, and they might have to face off against Wisconsin in the second round of this year's NCAA tournament. They do have a first-round matchup that they should probably get by against Hawaii. They're 15.5-point favorites in that game, 4:25 start on Thursday. But then Wisconsin, who takes on High Point, most likely gets by them. And then they have to face off against Arkansas. Not a great matchup for the SEC champs. Of course, with Darius Acuff Jr., you never know what will happen. But the team that should definitely be annoyed in this region is Arkansas and where they're placed. When you look at the hardest path, it's the other team right next to them, maybe the team that they face off against in the round of 32. That's Wisconsin, who gets a tough first-round matchup against High Point, who completely dominated the conference this past year, and then they end up taking on a High Point team that was in the tournament a season ago, so they have that little bit of experience. And then when you look at this Wisconsin team, of course, they should win the game. 10.5-point favorite, should handle business. But then you have to go through Arkansas and Darius Acuff Jr. in the next round. Follow that up with probably Arizona in the Sweet 16. Not a great path for the Badgers, who, yes, have played really well on their day, and they can really breeze by any team as long as they're scoring points. But it's not going to be easy, as they face 2 very tough teams in Arkansas as well as Arizona, maybe in the round of 32 and Sweet 16. The easiest path in the West region has to go to Purdue for me. Another team that should really walk to the Elite Eight when their 3 seed is Gonzaga, and a team in Gonzaga that, has really been good this year, but not enough to really have a lot of confidence against Purdue and the experience that they have with Trey Kaufman-Renn. They got one of the best point guards in Big Ten history, one of the best point guards in college basketball history in terms of assists in Braden Smith. He will step up big time for Purdue, and the team that won the Big Ten championship game that's feeling really good right now. This team should walk to the Elite Eight with the path that they got. Not even really a tough matchup in the second round against either Miami or Missouri. The best bet in the West goes to Utah State for me. -1.5. Take the 9-seeded Utah State Aggies over Villanova. And Nova's dealing with plenty of injuries. The game is also out in San Diego, which definitely does not help with the travel for the Wildcats. And give me Utah State, who can really score the ball. It comes down to offense more than defense in this game, and Utah State has proven that they can really score the ball, and I think that's what it comes down to. Both of these teams really good on the defensive side of the ball, but I think Utah State and their offense won't be able to be stopped, and they can definitely cover that 1.5 that they have against Villanova. That game on Friday at 4:10 p.m. The best underdog in the West finally is Missouri at plus 1.5. They take on Miami in one of the later games and one of the last games of the first round. That one is on Friday at 10:10 p.m. Miami coming into this game really feeling good. Of course, they lost to Virginia in the ACC tournament, but a team that was brutal a season ago. And to really have that turnaround with Jai Lucas as their head coach, give credit to the Hurricanes. I do think this is a better matchup for Missouri because this game will be a shootout on the offensive end. There's really no defense at all by either of these teams. Give me Missouri as well. The biggest advantage in all of the NCAA tournament. Missouri taking on Miami in St. Louis, Missouri. Give me Missouri to get the job done in front of the home crowd and handle business. They are plus 1.5 underdogs in this game. I'll take the Tigers as underdogs in this one. And last but not least, we go to the Midwest region, and that is led by the one-seeded Michigan Wolverines. The team that should be most annoyed in the West is Texas Tech, who gets a tough first-round matchup against 29-5 Akron. The Zips have been playing real well. They win the MAC Conference Championship. And Texas Tech, who's dealing with some injuries right now, still not 100% on Christian Anderson's status, although it looks like he will probably play in the NCAA tournament. JT Toppin being out, and Texas Tech having to go through Akron as the 5 seed in the Midwest region is just not an easy matchup for the Red Raiders. The hardest path in the Midwest region is the Kentucky Wildcats, who have to face off against a very tough Santa Clara team that has really played well so far this season in the WCC. They made it all the way to the championship game, and they've been playing games like it's their last for the last couple of weeks or so, really down to the wire. They have to win games to get into the NCAA tournament. They got the biggest win of the season in the WCC, semifinal against the St. Mary's Gales. Great win for them. They end up losing in the championship to Gonzaga, but making it as a 10 seed. Kentucky does not have an easy path to get through Santa Clara, and what they can do with their bigs, they could also shoot. You also then have to get past Iowa State in the second round, and that's not going to be an easy test for the Kentucky Wildcats. So a very tough path for Kentucky, although their fans will travel well. You probably expect them to win the game against Santa Clara. It's not going to be easy in the second round, especially against a very tough Iowa State team. It's not going to be easy for Kentucky. It will be easy for Virginia, in my opinion. They get Wright State in the first round, and then maybe Tennessee in the second round. Probably end up going into the Sweet 16, and they get their first tough test, which will probably be against Iowa State if all things go to plan. That's really a good path to me in this region. You get past Tennessee, and of course, Tennessee's been so inconsistent this year. They have some great wins and then some really bad losses. And I think Virginia, who's played well so far this season, and a team that's been a little bit underrated this season, they have been so good in ACC play, and a team that only lost by 4 in the championship game against Duke in the ACC just a couple of days ago. They are a team to watch out for in this Midwest region. And if they end up playing against Iowa State, that's going to be a defense-focused game. It's just going to be about who scores the ball more. And really, Virginia scored the ball all season long with Ryan Odom as their head coach. So give them their props. They end up heading into a nice, easy first-round matchup on Friday, 1:50 start, as they take on Wright State. The best bet for me, I just talked about the hardest path for this Midwest region being Kentucky. but the best bet in the Midwest region has to go to the Kentucky Wildcats at -3.5. They definitely have a tough path, but when you look at this game and the fact that it's in St. Louis, they will have traveling fans. They should be fine. -3.5. They're favored for a reason. Kentucky should handle business, and they have the talent to do so against Santa Clara, who a lot of people look at years past and say, well, the WCC hasn't done that well in the NCAA tournament minus Gonzaga. They're right. And I think Kentucky will give Santa Clara arguably their toughest test of the season. Give me the Wildcats as the best bet, -3.5 on Friday at 12:15. The final part of this is the best underdog in the Midwest region. It's going to be the St. Louis Billikens for me at +2.5. They are very efficient on the offensive side of the ball, over 50% from the field, over 40% from the three-point line, and they hold opponents to under 70 points per game. That's a perfect recipe heading into a matchup against the Georgia Bulldogs, who lost in the SEC tournament to Ole Miss because they just got down early. They did not play enough defense. They had to play catch up. They can score the ball, but St. Louis's ability to play defense very well and hold opponents to under 70 points per game, I know it's their toughest test of the season, really one of their toughest tests of the season, and it's not even close. But this game, Thursday, 9:45, give me the Billikens to cover +2.5 and be the best underdog in the Midwest region. But that will do it for episode 148 of the MudWatch Sports Podcast. Please subscribe below. I've been Zach Malama. Thanks for watching, and talk to you all on Friday.